What I mean by pot of gold practicing is that you sit down in your practice room chair and you say, today is the day I'm going to figure it out. Then I'll have my playing back from like 30% where I am now to go to 100%, and I'll just go walk back in and play concerto. As those concerts started to approach, I entered in sort of a period of like doubting whether my chops were strong enough to do the recital tour, 8 shows in 7 days or whatever it was. For the first time in a long time, I took, 3 or 4 days off the horn. I remember I was doing exercises in the car or whatever. And I got home and I went to play and I was like really unable to play well. So I ended up kind of persevering. I played the shows, altered repertoire, easier repertoires. Funnily enough, a couple of the 8 performances were like the best I've ever played in public, really truly at my top. But I knew something was up. After Christmas in January, I saw a movement disorder specialist, a neurologist, and he was the first one to say the word dystonia and diagnose me with it. The solutions that we have found center on certainly the change of focus, the focus away from the chops and away to healthy things like air and sound and phrase and maybe body. What I think happens to us when we call an injury, which is what you had, sometimes what happens is when we combine this injury with stress, or reaction to the injury is the injury. The culmination of this injury was the formation of the Embouchure Project. To find the real honest brokers who are willing to say, I can't help you. As a community, then we can communicate and say, no, this is something that happens to people, and it happens to no fault of their own.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today, I'm so excited to introduce today's guest because we have had the pleasure of working together in a couple of different ways. He has helped me a little bit in my own injury journey, but also I've had the pleasure of helping him a little bit in his project that we'll get into a little bit later. You've probably heard of it. It's called the Embouchure Project. I met this guy through a mutual friend of ours, Frankie Losurdo, and if you remember back to season 1, he was one of our first guests on the show. And I've loved working with both of these guys and learning from them. He's also the third horn player in the Toronto Symphony and does a lot of work in the Canadian area in music education. And so, without further ado, Gabe Radford, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Clark. It's excited to be on here.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to be on it. I wanted to pick your brain about some things that you said on the Embouchure Project podcast, sure. And also I just love hearing people's stories about their own personal journeys with injury. And so I just want to give you the reins. We start out by just having people share their stories with injury. Where does your journey kind of begin with all of that?
Well, thanks, Clark, and I'll go through it sort of quickly, but I won't skip over details because I think for a lot of people the details really matter. So
absolutely.
So I got my job after my first job in the Winnipeg Symphony. I got the Toronto Symphony job in 2002, and I loved it. I mean, I was very happy in the position, and as the years went by, I became even more comfortable in the position. It's a big orchestra job. I'm playing week in and week out, high pressure shows, full houses, things like that. Began my teaching career as well during this time. And generally things were on the up and up. As third horn, I wasn't necessarily getting the first call for things in town, but I was certainly on the list. And then starting about 2010 or so, 8 years into the gig, I started getting more and more calls. And we're talking some studio stuff. That wasn't a huge amount of studio stuff, but certainly a lot of chamber music and a lot of very prominent chamber music, national broadcasts, big houses, all these things. And I've never felt like a soloist. I've always felt like an orchestral player. Since high school, I've felt like an orchestral player. But I was getting these calls and playing the great repertoire, the great chamber repertoire written for the horn is a huge pleasure, but also a huge stress. So as I kept on working through that, my career was building. I started getting asked to, even concertos, and had the privilege of working with some incredible orchestras, including the Boston Symphony. I've been on 3 tours with them, and traveling the world playing the horn. It's really a dream come true. During this time, I had kids as well, and for the first time, experienced anxiety, like getting in the way of my daily life kind of anxiety, where I'd be, sitting around at home feeling anxious with no reason, nothing like nerves. And this for me is where nerves and anxiety take it's different paths. Anxiety is fear without having a reason for the fear. I started feeling that, and I had a meditation practice that I felt like really helped me. And thousands of hours of meditation later, I felt like I had come to a good spot. The kids got a bit older, stress levels were lower. Um, then we started getting into the 2000 teens, and things were still on the rise. I got asked to do a um, recital tour, very prominent, sort of international quality people on stage with me, and a really, really hard repertoire, the hardest repertoire written for the horn. And I thought, I was, hitting my mid 40s. I thought, okay, this is my sort of last chance to play the real bears of the repertoire. And as those concerts started to approach, I entered in sort of a period of like doubting whether my chops were strong enough to do the recital tour, 8 shows in 7 days or whatever it was. And I started worrying about sort of making a fool out of myself, really not playing up to the standard that I thought I could. And so I started getting worse. I felt like my playing was getting worse. I felt like the performance was getting worse. But I'm a pro. I've been doing this for a long time by then. And so we're in 2018, and I love hiking, and I took my family hiking in New Hampshire. I had an amazing time, and for the first time in a long time, I took 3 or 4 days off the horn. I remember I was doing exercises in the car, whatever. And I got home and I went to play, and I was like really unable to play well enough. Really, my chops felt stiff; they felt too big for the mouthpiece, and just clearly something was wrong, something new. And so I called it in. I just said to the organizers, I can't play this repertoire. So I ended up kind of persevering, played the shows, altered repertoire, easier repertoire, still hard. Still played the Brahms Trio, which is an incredibly challenging work of art. Funnily enough, a couple of the 8 performances were like the best I've ever played in public, really, truly at my top. But I knew something was up. I had to keep going, though. I mean, I had lots of work. Ended up touring. Which one was it? This was Europe with the Boston Symphony, and I
Wow.
needed to play. I needed to play. I was playing Mahler 3 with the BSO on tour, feeling like my chops were nowhere. And then November 2018. Sorry, this was September 2018. I came home and I had to walk in. First week on the job was Mahler 5. And I just knew I couldn't do it. And I said to my colleagues, I can't do this. And so that began the sort of injury journey where I sort of on again, off again work, completely untethered, having no idea what's wrong. Denying any sort of dystonia could be part of it, just thinking I had injured myself, not really sure what was going on, but really bullheaded, which is sort of my thing. So saw everybody I could see. I saw dentists. I saw because I thought it was my job. Eventually, by after Christmas in January, I saw a movement disorder specialist, a neurologist, and he was the first one to say the word dystonia and diagnose me with it. And I still was sort of in denial. I was like, whatever this is, I can solve it. And went on a long period of sort of in and out of work, just doing my best. And one day I was in my practice studio, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I threw a pencil eraser in between my teeth, in between my molars at the back, and it was like this awakenings moment. I could play. I was like, "What the heck is going on? I can play. This is a miracle." And so I remember ready to play Star Wars Episode 1, and sorry, whatever it is, A New Hope, and I could play. It was like the best I'd ever played it, sort of. That's how I felt anyway. So there I was. I thought I'd found a solution, but of course it wasn't a permanent solution. I was clamping down on my teeth to play the horn, and it got me through work, but it wasn't a workable solution. So I began searching for more answers. I saw lots of practitioners. I saw people that charge a lot of money for their time to fix dystonia cases. None of those really helped. Then I came across Bronwyn Ackerman, and Bronwyn is a professor in Sydney, Australia, and she has made the embouchure the study of her life. And she knows more about embouchure than anyone on the planet, and she started working with me. So I went to Germany twice to go work with her.
Isn't she in Australia?
Yeah, she's in Australia, but
Did she go to Germany with you?
she was doing research in Germany. Thank you for clarifying. That's why I went to Germany. She was doing research there, so I flew to Hanover, Germany. She was working with the neurologist Dr. Eckhart Altenmuller, who's also really somebody who has paved the way in this field. So she gave me physiotherapy exercises, is what she did, and taught me how my embouchure was actually working. And I got way better. On my second trip there, I spent 9 days with her, and then I felt like I was really getting there. And that was the beginning of March 2020. And I came home and we were playing pictures at an exhibition, and I felt like I was playing well. And we got shut down for the pandemic. And then I went through a period that I can't adequately explain it to you because I don't understand it. But I decided that I had a better way, and that I was just going to relax my way into playing well. And I sort of gave up on the techniques that I'd learned from Bronwyn. And for months and maybe even a year, I sort of floundered. And then I decided to recommit to what Bronwyn was working with me, and then sort of interpreted it myself and started getting better and better. And as the job started coming back in 2022, I started developing my own sort of practice habits where I was, really forming a good quality embouchure and trying not to flinch when I added air to that embouchure. Using a bunch of people's work, including Lucinda Lewis, who does this thing called blocked buzzing, where you block the mouthpiece, and that helped me a little bit. And so eventually I had to go back to work, and it hasn't been a smooth ride, but it's been now a couple of years, and I'm playing great, to be honest. And about half the time, I feel like I'm playing better than I ever have. And the other half, I'm still playing well. It's just sort of, normal. But because I built this new way of playing and this new approach, I feel like I'm doing better than I ever have before. So that's the sort of the long answer in a long way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned the eraser thing. I think in one of your conversations with Frankie, you mentioned kind of like pot of gold techniques or whatever, thinking
Pot
that
of gold
like
practicing.
this,
That's right.
sorry, I'm getting the camera frame, but this one thing will be the answer, right? I'll add that. I'll add my own story to that. In about a year after my injury, I was still trying to find what was going on. And for me, like, shaving took away the pain temporarily. And at first I was like, you got to be kidding me. A year of searching, and this is what is caught, or what the solution is, right? Turns out it wasn't. I still don't know why it relieved the pain for a little bit, but I can totally relate to that kind of feeling of, I found the one thing, but it's not.
It's funny. So, I mean, we'll certainly get into this, but, a neurologist will tell you that if you have dystonia, you can change the stimulus. So the way the brain works, as far as I understand it as a horn player, is stimulus response. And then when you're trying to change that, you go stimulus response, and then you're trying to consolidate a new habit. And so if you can change the stimulus, you can change the response. So it could be that after you shaved, you had a new feeling of how your embouchure and your chops felt. And so temporarily, you sort of used a new path in your brain, to use a metaphor, and you were able to play better. And but that for me is a clue. And for me, my equivalent of that is a device called Stratos, which, don't go run out and buy the Stratos, anybody. But for me, what this device is, I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's basically a suction cup that attaches to the shank of your mouthpiece. And so as you bring up the instrument, you get a push of the suction cup on your chin. And, I was convinced this is structural, like absolutely 100% convinced that it was structural. It was holding my tune in place, which allowed me to play. But, I speak to a lot of smart people now that I've done the Embouchure Project. And these smart people, namely the neurologist, Dr. Zenos Mason, said he believes that was a change of stimulus. So it
Interesting.
felt different to my brain. So therefore, I was able to have a workaround for that synaptic pathway so that when I had this thing on, I wouldn't have my reactions. Now, again, I feel like all the questions are not answered and the same thing with the pencil erasers. Like, I think a neurologist would say that was a change of stimulus that led to a change of reaction. But my very, very strong perception was that it was just simply holding things in place. And it wasn't about stimulus and reaction. It was a structure, providing me the structure that my muscles weren't providing naturally. So, what do? I would say trust a doctor. But from me as a horn player, I got to say it felt, and the Stratos too felt like it was actually holding things in place. And I didn't say this, but as part of my recovery, I used this Stratos device on stage. In fact, one of our concert programs for the Toronto Symphony has me playing my horn with the Stratos playing Mahler 1. It's there. And it's like, okay, well, that's made it into the public eye.
There
Uh,
you go.
but the truth is, eventually, after maybe 6 or 8 months of using that on the job, I realized I was a better player without it than with it, and I haven't gone back. And so it's, I would hate for anybody to think that device was a cure, because it's not. But I will say, I don't believe I would have gotten back to work full time as a major symphony third horn player had I not used that device to find the structure of a good quality embouchure and play.
Yeah, I mean, all those tools, they serve a purpose,
Right.
right? And it's interesting how we think they may serve a different purpose than what they were actually intended for.
Exactly.
I mean, we all use like weird things for the same purposes anyways. You could use a pencil or, I mean, for whatever purpose. But I kind of want to stay in your injury experience for a little bit longer in that I'm curious, along with those pedagogical habits, we'll call them habits for the sake of argument, what else did you notice shifted in your maybe lifestyle might be a better way to put it, that may have, looking back on it, contributed to your injury that you changed to after your injury?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, great question. I think it's really important not to lie when you're recalling your injury experience. I don't want to claim that I've done anything better than anyone else. I've made all the mistakes, which I think allows me to help other people.
Absolutely.
So you're implying a transformation of behavior, and I can't give you the satisfaction of saying that these following changes made it better. So I'm gonna just be honest. So
Sure.
I had this incredible practice of meditation that I had real trouble maintaining in the pandemic and beyond. Those skills that I got in meditation, I think really helped me, along with 10 years of studying the Alexander technique, really, really helped me. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but so
Oh, yeah.
the idea, yeah. So the idea of Alexander, we can get into this, but I think that the solutions that we have found center on certainly the change of focus, the focus away from the chops and away to healthy things like air and sound and phrase and maybe body. And so I think Alexander technique helped me in that way. Um, I had a habit, full disclosure, I had a habit of drinking a bit too much, especially at night, especially after a stressful concert, which was really interrupting my sleep. I don't do that anymore. No judgment on people that do. There's a certain aspect. I just turned 50, and I think that there's a certain aspect where the body just eventually says that enough is enough. And so I don't do that anymore. And I used to do it a lot, maybe every night, like not getting stumbled down drunk or anything, but like having maybe one more than I should. And I think it's really, really important for people to understand that that first really deep part of sleep, if you have any sleep tracker, you'll know this, that like for the first 2 hours, that's when your really deep sleep happens. And this is when the brain does its consolidation and healing and all of these really, really important things. So if you go to sleep stoned or drunk, you're robbing your brain of this process where it gets rid of the junk and consolidates learning from the day. So that's a big thing that I've actually done. Um, Here's what I wish. And the other thing is that I was a very fit guy, like very fit guy prior to any embouchure problems. And then once I hit embouchure problems and the pandemic, I became a very unfit guy. And this is not my nature. My nature is to be like Mr. Discipline. And like but when I say very fit, I'm talking 25 years of fitness. Um, and so I'm now back taking care of myself a bit better. I think that helps on a day-to-day basis. Sleep, diet, exercise. I mean, the doctors aren't wrong. The data is not wrong. That is there. Sleep, diet, exercise. If you're trying to get better at anything, if you're trying to do better in your life, sleep, diet, exercise, those things are going to be number 1, 2, and 3, not in that order. And so I would say those things are better in my life. It's changed my teaching. So I've never been a particularly accurate player. That's just my honest thing. I have always been very expressive, a sort of high effort, high energy player. Post recovery, I don't push things harder than I need to. I let my colleagues also join in. I'm no longer the sort of the driving force of the section. I'm definitely there, and I'm definitely contributing, but I'm not sort of on the edge of the wave. And I think that's healthier. I maybe should have done that all the time. And I am working hard to not get stressed out when I play. I used to spend a lot of time thinking about what other people were thinking of my playing and sort of living up to my own reputation. And that has been, that's a lifelong project for me. I really want to be good at what I do, and I really care what other people think. So for me to just be like, I am who I am and I'm doing my best. And this is the privilege of somebody with a tenured chair, let's be honest. But I'm trying to do that, and I'm better. I'm less worried about what people think. But still, that's an ongoing thing. You know, I've played some really big concerts over the past couple of weeks, and I get more nervous than I should. And I'm still working on it.
Hey guys, I just want to interrupt the show real quick and just tell you about something I've been working on for a long time that I'm so excited to share with you. Like I've said in the past, you have the potential to make your injury become a benefit to you, an asset to you. But at the same time, I know the feeling of being lost, not knowing who to turn to, where to go, what resources to use, all sorts of things, and also how to reframe the situation, the mental skills that's needed to be able to do that. And so if you are one of those people looking for that resource, that help, that coaching, I want to tell you about something I've been working on, and that is Musician Unchained. Musician Unchained is now the newest coaching platform for musicians going through injury. It is intended to help you view your situation in a way that benefits you and make the changes in your life that you need to become the best version of yourself because of your injury. Your injury being the impetus for that change. I would love to be able to help you in any way that I can, even if that means sending you somewhere else to someone who can better help you. And so if you are interested in working together one-on-one, visit our website, musicianunchained.com/let's hang for more details. All right, let's get back to the show. That's a lifelong pursuit for all of us. And I'm glad you answered that question in the way that you did, because you kind of got me thinking about many people's experiences I've seen, including my own, in that when we get injured, especially people who are chronic overthinkers like me, or we intellectualize everything or whatever, we try to find the causation, like every minute detail of it, so we don't replicate it. I think there is some value to that to an extent. But especially for me, I've noticed that my journey with injury and trying to find those habits sometimes can get in my own way. I can get my own way by doing that, because if I become too hyper analytical of what caused it, what didn't cause it, then, I mean, what kind of lifestyle is that? But on the same token, I think an injury does force you to kind of reevaluate certain things. And I think that is healthy. I think that is, can be a very good benefit to going through something like that. Would you agree?
I do. And I would say that I'm also this same kind of personality. And this is, I've had a lot of conversations, maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 conversations with people now that are going through this or something similar to this. And very often it's this, to use a sort of slang, A-type or analytical leader type people that fall into these problems. I think because we're constantly holding our own self up all the time. And I'll tell you that more and more, and I'm really refining this thinking these days, that we need to use our strengths for good and not for evil. And so, if I were to dole out advice that I know is not harmful, I would say that when we're practicing, the any sort of analytical work is a means to an end, and that end is music making. And so that when you are practicing these skills and you're being analytical about how you're forming your embouchure and how you're using your air and stuff, this stuff is for a time and a place. This can be a certain, after half an hour of warming up, you're going to spend 15 minutes on production and embouchure and all these things. But then you need to know when to stop. You need to set a timer that goes beep. And when that timer goes beep, you need to go back to focusing on air, sound, music. And you need to be a little bit firm with yourself and say, I can't think about my embouchure because I'll use metaphors and stuff because I'm not a neurologist, but the way I refer to it is easy for the brain and hard for the brain. And for me, I'm thinking about song. There's no such thing as a human society in the history of humans that has not included song, right? Every society. And that's important. That's important to ruminate on. So we are hardwired in our brain for language and song. So if you're thinking about like vowels, for instance, I think you can think that until the cows come home. I think that's no problem. If you're thinking about song, air, breathing, these are natural, these are hardwired in our brain. Again, metaphor, but true. Like this is important for us. But embouchure, I mean, a vital muscle for the embouchure is the buccal muscle. And the buccal muscle by nature was given to us to keep food from going into our cheeks like a chipmunk and to keep it between our teeth so that we can chew. That's why we have a buccal muscle. We don't have a buccal muscle to say, if you don't fire muscle, we're not going to get our job or get tenure or win an audition. Like, I think these things are very difficult and very, very hard for our brain to understand. So the way I think of this is I can think about the form for a while, but I need to think about the goal, maybe let's call it 10 times as much as I think about the process. Trust the process. But that process indeed, though, I think you need that part of that process is changing your focus away from injury to a healthy mindset, which, the great teacher Arnold Jacobs distilled down to just wind and song. And I think that's really vital that when we are playing every day, for the majority of the practice, we're thinking about playing beautifully.
Yeah, and you and Frankie talk a lot about on your show, and in your circles about the importance of having a kind of a partnership of both of those concepts, song and wind, and then the more, I don't know if I would even call them concrete pedagogical practice or whatever. I kind of see it as like, and I've talked to Frankie about this in my own consultations with him, but it seems like we try to make the overall foundation of our musicianship song and wind. But I don't know, I feel like I can say, at least post-injury for me, I see the pedagogy as the foundation, like the concrete foundation that the song and wind can then have a foundation to be on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Song and wind is the luxury of the healthy player.
Yeah, there you go.
It's and so I completely agree with you. And some of what we now teach as people that try to help people that are in trouble is to set your embouchure before you play. And this is heresy for a lot of people, that the wind should create the embouchure, said the person that has been doing the same way since they were 10 years old. And it feels like the wind is creating the embouchure. So I completely agree with you. But what I say to a lot of people is that we are on a path towards health, right? If we want to get better, we've got to be on a path towards health. What is health? Health is being able to set an embouchure without really thinking too hard about it and thinking about the music. So if you're on that path to health, you have to be constantly increasing the amount of time every day you spend sort of not obsessing about whether your chin or your lip is in exactly the right position. So how do you do that? You do that with sequestered practice. We know this from the study of neurology. We know that small doses many times a day, if you want to change something quickly, you do 10-minute practices 6, 7, 8 times a day. How much time you have, use it. But you need to rest. If you do 10 minutes of super focused practice, you need to do 20 minutes of checking your email, like looking at social media, or doing some other completely other kind of practice. And so this focused practice will get you better for sure. But then after you've gone through these timed sessions, then you need to just play melodies and play beautifully. And this is really hard. And I'll tell you one of the tricks that I found to sort of bridge that gap. And this is super controversial. I've never seen anybody do this, but it was to use practice mutes. So recovery, we want this recovery to be just like smooth and up and to the right. And it's just not. Nobody gets better that way. And so, it's one step forward, 2 steps back is more like it. But the other thing is that I made these huge leaps, individual practice session. Unfortunately, this leads to this pot of gold practicing. But the truth is that I have a couple of really memorable periods in my life, and both of them were on vacation. One of them was in a Paris apartment. I'd taken my family to Europe, even though I was worried about my income. It's like, okay, but still, we got to live normally. And I'd taken them on this vacation, and we had an apartment, and I was playing with the practice mute in. I just played concertos with the practice mute in. And what this did was it allowed me to just think about the music making without having the detail of the imperfect attacks or the cacks, the missed notes, and just play top to bottom while watching the Olympics or whatever. And the other one was on a ski trip. I sound very bougie, but like this is pretty modest skill. And my family.
I'm in Utah, so
okay,
skiing is the thing here.
It's the thing. So I was like in this condo, and I just threw the practice mute in. And both of those times, I went back to work the next week a better player. So I think that we can find these bridges from the sort of construction of the embouchure to the end goal, which is playing music. And I say that I really decided that I was better. I was touring with the TSO. We were playing Orchestra Hall in Chicago and Carnegie in New York, and we were playing hard stuff, including third horn solos. And when I found myself thinking about how I sounded and not about the embouchure to make that sound, I knew that I could finally put this beast behind me after 4 or 5 years of wrestling it. And it's, of course, not completely behind me. I play every day at work, and I play well. But, I do have to definitely think about things a lot more than I used to. One of my favorite moments in my recovery was playing on this format, over online, with the great German horn soloist, Mary Louise Neunecker. And she said to me, "Oh, you'll get back your playing, but you'll never get back your naivety." And she was right about that. Like, I still just don't throw the mouthpiece up in my face and play. But yeah, I'm playing fine, but I really need to actually create an embouchure before I play. But I advocate and do. I think I'm successful most of the time. Set it and forget it. So once you've been through the coachings with a real expert like Frankie, then you know how to create that embouchure. That put on the mask, as they say. Put on the mask.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. And now it can take the air. Right? And then, but you should be able to set and forget. The finest players look like they're pretending to play when they play.
Yeah, you remind me of something that I actually had the pleasure of having Wayne Berger on the show recently, and I can't remember who told him, and he wasn't dealing with dystonia, but his own things, and the person told him, don't look for it to feel the same way that it did before. I guess that's kind of akin to what you're saying.
Exactly. That's the naivety aspect. Yeah. Don't search, again, this pot of gold thing where you're like, oh, one day I'm going to find the solution. No, that's not going to be. And like, we should, when we're super healthy and naive, going back to that word, when we're super healthy, like things might not feel great, but we're like, oh yeah. I know how to I'm a pro. I know how to deal with that. Right. And it's after you have the perspective of not being able to do it well anymore, that you're searching for this freedom and ease that maybe you never really had ever, but you were able to put it into context a bit better.
Yeah, very well put. I got another question for you about this pot of gold stuff, because you're the only person that I've heard talk about it. What's the difference between a pot of gold and like a legitimate light bulb connection moment that, is helping you on that process, on that journey?
Beautiful question. So let me, first of all, because I don't think in this podcast we've explained what I mean by pot of gold practicing. So
Yeah.
what I mean by pot of gold practicing is that you sit down in your practice room chair and you say, today is the day I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to lift my thing here and I'm going to flatten my chin or whatever. And then I'll have my playing back from 30% where I am now to go to 100%. And I'll just go walk back in and play concertos. Okay. So that's what I mean by finding the one little thing that's going to make you 100% better.
It just solves the problem.
Right.
Point
Solves
blank.
the whole problem, like the pencil erasers, which were false. It's like a mirage. So, however, I did already talk about these huge steps you can make in practicing. So what's the difference? So the huge steps you're not searching for, you trip over them with patient and methodical, process-oriented, which is why I love the title of this podcast, with process-oriented practicing, with practicing that is aware of the destination, because I think that sometimes when we're injured, we can lose the destination. The destination is music. And so when we lose the destination, we get caught. That's why all these metaphors, spinning your wheels, whatever. So we get caught in this sort of practicing just to practice moment. Like maybe if I just keep on going, it's going to get better. Instead, we're like, okay, well, here's the end goal and here's how I'm going to get here. And whatever techniques you taught or you're using, you do them and you patiently do them. And then these things will come to you. And I think this is why it's important that we pay attention. And, I everyone's recommending a book, but I've read hundreds and hundreds of books. And throughout this injury process, I've read more books than I care to admit. But the truth is that there's one that stands out above all of the rest. Two. Let me admit it. Two that stand out above the rest. One is called The Talent Code, and the other one is called The Body Keeps the Score. And let me start with The Body Keeps the Score. And this one is hard because, as I said in the moment, I'm embarrassed referencing this book because it's about people that have had quote unquote real trauma, like people that have experienced awful things in their lives. And I'm like, can't play the horn anymore, but otherwise absolutely fine. Right. And so I don't want to equate my experience with true, life-changing trauma. Nonetheless, it's a trauma. And this social scientist and therapist, Bessel van der Kolk, goes through this
Oh, yeah.
this book. It basically says that your body is sending you messages. And one of his lines is, there's no such thing as an action. This is important. There's no such thing as an action the body forgets. So he's saying, when you go into these actions of fearful playing or compromised playing or all these things, or even just like distracted playing where you're not paying attention to what you're doing, the body's learning through all of these things. And so if you put your body through this stressful overuse on your instrument, your body might react. And this is probably what Embouchure syndrome is. The other one is The Talent Code. And this book is a very easy to read book. And he even put out an easier to read book, which is called The Little Book of Talent, which I recommend using that as a reference guide just to remember what he said. But the anecdotes in The Talent Code are so wonderful. And there are so many learning lessons from that. But one of the things that I always think about, and this can put some pressure on your practice room, but he says, if you depart the deep practice zone, you might as well quit. Now, this for me, not quit forever, but quit the practice session. So this for me is why I now use timers and I teach timers, because it's not that the timer is telling you have to stop. The timer is asking you to do an audit of the past 4 minutes and say, am I still doing what I intended to do 4 minutes ago? Now, if it goes beep and you still are, then I think you can keep on going, reset the timer. But for me, bit of a scatterbrain, more often than not, in the course of those 4 or 6 or 7 minutes, I've gotten off track. I'm not really thinking. I'm thinking about lunch. I'm thinking about going to work. I'm thinking about my kids or whatever. I'm not actually in the deep practice zone. So I've become better. I'm not perfect, but I've become better at deciding why I'm in the chair that day and throwing on. I've got, even on my watch in the top right corner, I've got this like quick thing, 5-minute timer. So let's say I'm working on a muscular thing, or let's say I'm working on single tonguing. I will put that on for 5 minutes and my wrist will vibrate 5 minutes later. Okay, is that good work? All right, let's move on. So, yeah, I think reading the talent code was really helpful to understand how the brain changes in response to good quality practicing.
Totally. I'd like to add another book to your top 2
Probably.
to make it a top 3. It's Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, another social scientist or organizational psychologist, and talks a lot about the practice methods that people use. He goes into musicians and things like that. It's awesome.
That book is on my shelf and I haven't read it. So thank you. Thank you for reminding me to read it. It's been there for a while.
For sure. I want to dig into something you said a little bit ago. And I apologize if I'm misquoting you, but you said something along the lines of focusing on the music, or when you're coming back, focusing on the music as the destination, I think is what you said. And I'm really grateful you phrase it that way, because for a lot of people, there's a lot of different external factors that put a lot of pressure on their recovery. In your case, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but probably it being your profession put some pressure on it. And I think there is some value in having external motivators, but not to the point where it's influencing the speed of your recovery in a maladaptive way. And so I'm curious, in your experience and the people that you've helped as well, how you've helped them to recognize the appropriate motivators that they should be focusing on so that they can avoid those pot of gold potholes, type of thing.
Yeah, you're asking good questions because they're unanswerable. And so, but let me try. So I firmly believe that had the pandemic, God forbid, lasted forever, I would not have gotten better. So I made progress in the pandemic, but I only got better when I was at work, and I had no choice, and I had to get better. Now, this doesn't mean, and people are so quick to say it's just psychological, It's not just psychological. It's not. But needing to be at work, there is a certain aspect to it that you'll run your fastest in the race kind of thing. And even no matter how you train, still somebody will run faster than they ever have before to win that race. And there's something about being at work. I had the greatest music director. I can't believe how incredible he's been. But for a while, there was sort of obvious that I was struggling. This is a very high level orchestra, and everybody's got to be, pulling their weight. And, in his office for sure. And like needing to sort it out. And I believe those moments held me. But the thing is that we don't need to suffer. Like we're not doing this to suffer. So there's a fine line there. Don't throw yourself into situations where you're only going to experience shame and suffering. I believe that maybe the hardest thing that I've noticed on people is shame, this feeling of embarrassment. And I think that we need to avoid situations where we feel this sort of like deeply social feeling of not being part of the group, feeling like an outsider. We shouldn't go back into those situations if we feel like that's going to be the predominant feeling we're going to get. And so this is about building courage slowly to realize that we can't care about what other people think, that we have to be true to ourselves and to find our courage. And in these moments, I think that let's say you're not a pro and you're avoiding a brass quintet rehearsal, that you're a regular in this brass quintet, you've been calling in sick, just saying you can't do it. I think you need to find a way to build the courage to make that happen. I just agreed to a concerto, by the way. And this is one of those moments where, be on a concerto, I'm a third horn player and a very fine one, but like, that's what I do. I'm not really a concerto guy, but like, I said yes to it because, I'm going to walk on stage. I'm going to find that courage. I'll be fine. And I think I'm better at saying, listen, if I miss a few notes, I'm sorry, that's life. I think I'll still probably do a pretty good job. So I guess my long-winded response to your question is that you need to build and cultivate courage. And you need to build and cultivate those skills. And don't assume that they're all of a sudden going to come to you in the show. But understand that perfection is something you probably never had in the first place. And that everybody, I mean, of the hundreds of people I've spoken to, they'll all say that they couldn't believe how great their colleagues/friends have been, how supportive they've been. And so I think that we shouldn't focus on what other people are going to think about us. Know when we're ready. And if we're ready, build the courage to say, I'm getting better. And then there's a certain amount of courage to say, I'm no longer the injured person. Like, I think that when we play as if we're injured, and you sort of quoted me, and it's true, but let me just remind you that what I said is we should be on a path to health. What is health? Health is being able to focus on the music. And so part of that path to health is not just thinking about the music. Part of that path to health is needing to other strategies to get the job done, or get the rehearsal done, or just play in front of other people. This is something that we are going to need to go through a process of, and just understand we're on that path of eventually health. And of course, health is back to that feeling of naivety where you just put the instrument up to your face and you just blow.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and tell you about something that I'm really, really excited about. For a while now, I have wanted to create an even more effective resource than just the podcast that injured musicians can go to receive the support that they need. And recently I did just that. So write this down. Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. I know it's a long title. We're still working on that part. But this is a place where people can go now, injured musicians and even musicians who have gone through injury in the past, and people that help musicians go through injury, where they can go to receive the support that they need, whether that be ask questions, share their victories, share their frustrations, and overall just receive the community and the support that they need in a very proactive, intentional way. And so I just ask that you guys support these injured musicians by sharing this group with them, that they can receive the support that they need. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, beautifully said. So many places I want to take this now. You talked about skills, and this may be a little bit off the beaten path from what we've been talking about, but I also, when I was talking to Frankie on this show, he mentioned that this kind of injury period kind of is almost a personal pandemic, and yours happened during the pandemic. So there's that, but the loss of being able to do what you normally do, I think is what he was getting at. And we all had to people were doing all sorts of things because they couldn't work or things like that. I'm curious if you picked up any new skills on your journey back to recovery, and be them musical or whatever. Just, I'm thinking of the people, because I've been in this situation of you can't play because you're recovering. You're following the doctor's orders, but there's that big gaping hole, and you feel like doing anything else is like against who you are or things like that. And I'm wondering if you have any words for those type of people.
Huh. So some people baked sourdough during the pandemic. I did my MBA.
Yeah.
So I did my MBA.
Cool.
So I went back to school as a 47-year-old or whatever I was then. So this is a big thing for me. And I didn't know if I was going to get better. I like to think I mostly knew I was going to get better, but I really wasn't sure. I've always had these sort of business interests and management interests. And so, yeah, I did my MBA. And like a lot of sort of friends of mine are like, oh, you got better because you had that healthy discussion of the MBA. And I don't think that's true. But I do think that it helped me take a bit of pressure off that my main income might go away if I can't get back to work. But if I get this MBA, then at least I'll be hireable. And so, yeah, I worked on other things. I've always got lots of projects on the go, and also teaching is a great outlet for me. So all these things combined, the answer is yes. Um, if I were to sort of rewrite history, I'd taken more time off. I would have read the tea leaves on the pandemic and realized I could have taken a few months off and then sort of come back, sort of a step one, you know. And I never did that. I sort of, if anything, practiced too much. And the thing is, the reason why I teach now this whole like don't do the pot of gold practicing is because I spent like 18 months sitting down at the practice room every day saying, today is the day I'm going to thinking that's a healthy mindset, because you can fool yourself into thinking that's a healthy mindset. Today is the day I'm going to figure it out.
Because you feel in control.
Yeah, it's not a healthy mindset any more than breaking your leg and assuming you're going to walk normally when your leg is still broken is healthy. It's not healthy. What you need to be doing is strengthening the muscles around that break so that when you're ready to relearn how to walk with a broken leg or a healed leg, you can do so with some strength. And so this to me is the key, is not thinking that I was going to miraculously heal, because healing of every disease in the body, healing is a process. Nobody waves their magic wand and gets better. And so I think that probably pursuing those other things stopped me from really crazy obsessive practicing. And certainly for brass players, I mean, where do we max out? 3 hours? 4 hours? Like, God, I've been doing this. I mean, I'm 50. I've been playing since I was 10. Okay. And I don't think I've ever practiced 4 hours in a day. I mean, I've played, certainly I have rehearsals and stuff, but just practicing 4 hours, that's a lot. That's a lot of practicing. So, yeah, I think that we do have time, especially if we're, as you say, I love this sort of personal pandemic thing because it's as wrenching psychologically, which I think we should talk about, by the way, about the effects on family and life. But, it can be really hard. So having something else to do, I think, can be very helpful.
Definitely. The thing that I realized, and I'm so glad you went to the psychological thing. That's what I try to focus on the show, is kind of the more experiential mindset type of things, because far be it from me to really give any opinions on medical things, or it's not my purview. But the things that we don't necessarily talk about in these circles of performing arts medicine or whatever, I feel like that's what the big focus of this show is. And I mean, if you would like to go into kind of your experience from that psychological side of what that toll, the toll that had on you, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. What are these things? And I was going to say this earlier, so I'm glad you brought it up, that one of my coping mechanisms, well, from the very beginning, was to be completely honest with everybody. And this has huge downsides. So let me talk about the positives, and then I'll talk about the negatives. So all of my colleagues, every single member of my orchestra that asked, some people I don't really talk to generally in my social circle, but personnel, all of the brass players, music director, all of these people I was absolutely upfront with. I have a problem with my chops. It's probably embouchure dystonia. I remember once my music director saying to me, "Are you sure you can get better?" Expecting me to say, "Yeah." And the answer was, "No. I promise you I'm going to do everything I can to get better, but I can't. I'm not sure. So I don't know." But this openness allowed me to friends and family, and like explaining it to your parents is really hard, And so this open book thing, I think, helped me not be living a secret and not be living a lie at work where my colleagues are like, "What's going on? Why is he not playing how he used to?" And so it allowed me to say, "Yeah, I'm struggling and I'll get better." The huge, huge downsides are real. And some people may decide they don't want to be dishonest because you're wounded. You know, our culture is one that is so macho as brass players that being imperfect, not strong, not dominant, not sailing of the orchestra, there's something wrong with you. You're the weak, you're the antelope that gets caught by the lion. And so, yeah, so sometimes people would be listening to me like, "Is he better yet?" listening, which is brutal because I can play beautifully and miss a note. They're like, "Oh, not better yet," you know? And you don't listen, if you're in a symphony orchestra job, the last thing you want as a music director looking at you is is he going to be okay? Like that's a really awful feeling. Now, as I said, I had this music director that was so generous to me. And when he cued me, it's just with this huge smile, and I got better, I feel like, because of it. Um, so that's that aspect. Like being an open book, I think is helpful. The stress is unbelievable. The thing is that, we did a study. One of the first studies of the Embouchure Project was with neurologist Dr. Zenos Mason at USC, and we did the study, and we were interviewing people about why they chose the treatment path they chose. And there are a lot of practitioners out there, people that are selling solutions, and some of them have. Everybody's got their slice on the solution, and nobody has the whole solution because everyone's different. Um, but a lot of the time, what we're looking for is somebody with these precise answers that will take the stress away. Because, sorry, in these interviews, I was going to mention this, that everyone really talks about it being part of their identity. Like,
Yep.
my
Yep.
playing is me. I am my playing. And this notion of not playing anymore is like, I don't know, it's like changing your name. It's like it's fundamental to who you are. So psychologically, this is very hard on our mind body to be doubting whether we are ourselves anymore. And it can be incredibly stressful. And unfortunately, I know a lot of situations where the family life can't sustain it. And this is a very sad but true thing. That a lot of times this can cause incredible relationship stress. Certainly being a parent, coming out of the practice room frustrated, not like just making sure, just trying my best to like leave that in the practice room and not take it out on my kids. I did pretty well, not perfect, just like everyone else. You know, I happen to have a spouse who's in the business and who is incredibly compassionate and patient. And it wasn't easy on her. She'll tell you, like, it was her journey too. But we navigated that just fine. But that doesn't mean everybody will. The stress was incredible, and I'm very, very open about a few things. First of all, I overused alcohol, and I'm not talking 11 a.m. drinking, but I am talking about 9 p.m. every night. Grabbing a bottle of scotch and having a couple of stiff hits, before bed, and no judging, but I know that that was not good for my health. And the other thing that I think is really important for me to be honest about is that I used doctors. I went to the doctor, and they have pharmaceutical solutions to these problems. And so I went on, what are they called? SSRIs. I always mix them up, but I went on an antidepressant, and I said to the doctor, I'm not depressed. Like, I had lots of stress. No real anxiety, but just stressed out. And the doc was like, no, I think this is good. And not to get too sidetracked, but these class of drugs, the one I took is called escitalopram. Actually
That's called
allows
Lexapro in the States.
It's called what?
Lexapro.
Lexapro. Okay. So this drug actually allows for the brain to be more plastic, more changeable, which is why your mood improves, because you sort of learn a new way of thinking. And so I went on this drug, and I was on it for a couple of years. And I felt like, because I went off it, I realized the difference. But I was under the impression, I was like, I'm a no drug guy, like whatever, even though I had the drinks at night. But I thought like I would be a zombie version of myself. It's completely untrue. And again, this is going to be a doctor thing. You're going to talk to your doctor, but like, I feel like that drug helped me, and helped me with the stress levels. And I had a stronger drug, a narcotic called clonazepam, which I had a tough relationship with. I think it's too strong a drug for me personally. A lot of people use it for mood regulation. There's no judgment there, but it certainly helped me get through the real rough stretches, like having to play big solos for sold out shows when I wasn't fully on my feet. I feel like that drug helped for relieve the biggest strain. And I don't take that anymore, but I don't take either of those drugs anymore. But there's also beta blockers, which again, prescribed by a doctor, I think can be a really effective solution to not allowing yourself to peak too much in stress. We're not trying to win any competitions here. It's not cheating. We're playing music. And I think that as we said at the beginning of the call, lowering stress and not caring about what people think is a lifelong endeavor. And I'm happy because I don't like taking drugs. I'm happy that 95% of shows, I don't need them. But I'm also now at my age and stage, I'm like, I have no problem taking a beta blocker if I've got a big solo big, hard piece. To be honest, I no longer equivocate. I like to quote my doctor who says, there's no special place in heaven for the person that doesn't take the pill. And for me, that rings true because I thought, oh, I'm gonna be better than those people who have to take a pill, and that's complete BS. For those people that are suffering, those people that are injured, bring your doctor in as somebody who can help you manage. Doctors are for illness. Injury is a form of illness. So, so bring your doctor into the conversation. No, you don't have to walk around completely stoned on drugs all the time, but you can use these things as a tool to get better. And it's not a life sentence. I'm living proof that I decided at some point a couple of years ago that I no longer needed those drugs. But for those couple of years that I was on them, they helped a lot. So just getting back to it, stress is real. Coping mechanisms can be healthy and unhealthy. Focus on the really healthy coping mechanisms. And as I said at the beginning of the call, the strongest, even stronger than drugs, sleep, diet, and exercise are the ones that are the way to meaningfully reduce stress in your life.
Absolutely. Thank you for being so vulnerable there. I think there's going to be a lot of people, especially freelance musicians, that need to hear that specifically. I've had very prominent guests on the shows who made their living off of freelance work, and I could hear the fear in their voice of not wanting to be damaged goods or perceived as damaged goods. And I just feel for all of those people who don't have that. I don't know if luxury is the right word.
It's a luxury. Having a tenure job in an orchestra allowed me the time, and it's not impossible to do all these things as a freelancer. But I'm going to openly admit that it was easier because I could call in sick and still get paid.
Yeah. And I want people, especially those freelancers, to make the connection from what you said before to what you just shared, that the destination is healthy playing, and connect that dot with what you just said, that you need to find those support systems, those healthy coping mechanisms. I found an interesting study from a sports psychologist, actually, and I don't see any reason why this wouldn't have similar implications with musicians. But the fact that the perception of outside support systems actually does more for the psychological well-being of the injured, in this case athlete, than the actual reception of that support, if that makes sense.
So, the culmination of this injury was the formation of the Embouchure Project. And so
Yes.
The thing about the Embouchure Project is that there's a few goals in there. Okay. So first of all, I spent $20,000 of my own money on practitioners, on people trying to help me. I have never given Bronwyn $1. She was doing research at the time. So I was under her research projects. And there were a lot of people that I gave a lot of money, including one practitioner, $14,000 or $15,000.
Wow.
This can be a huge, huge financial outlay. And it's important for everybody to understand that this can be part of the experience. But the Embouchure Project was to try to find the people that really knew what they were doing, to find the real honest brokers who are willing to say, I can't help you. Like, I think that is any practitioner in any health field should know when to say, I've done my work with you. You're not better. Let me see if I can find you something else, or you should go see someone else. I think that's a fundamental ethical thing that practitioners do, and people don't do that because it's their business. I sort of understand it. The other thing is that I'm trying to inspire research at the academic level so that we get neurologists who are working with physiotherapists and occupational therapists to develop ways to retrain. The data on retraining is about, I don't want to say the only, but one of the really hopeful data points that we have in recovery is retraining, which you can think of as, working on the muscles, putting them in the right order, and firing them in a healthy way to play our instruments. So that's really working. So we need those people to be doing research and publishing that. So what I say is it crowds out the people that are making stuff up as they go. And It brings in science, medical science. We have it for a reason. We know that things work. And finally, and importantly, getting back to your point, it's to build a community
Absolutely.
where I'm not by myself. I'm not weak. This is not me being a psychologically challenged, weak individual that shouldn't belong in the gladiator ring. It's none of those things. And so, as a community, then we can communicate and say, no, this is something that happens to people, and it happens through no fault of their own. And we need to support. We need to be a community that says, when this happens to you, we got you. Doesn't mean that
Absolutely.
we're not going to wave a magic wand and you're going to get better, but that you're part of a community now, and we can help you find that path as best you can towards health. And so that community, this social psychologist that you're talking about, I believe that to be true. That you might not get that at work. It's work is intense. We're performing for people. It's a highly charged environment. We care about what we do more than any other profession on earth, and with many other professionals on earth. And so we really, really care about standards. And so if somebody isn't pulling their weight, you can feel the social pressure hard. And so sometimes that community you're talking about can happen in the Embouchure Project or Trust the Process or in your family at home or your friends. But yes, I think that what you said is precisely true. And that goes back to my thing about being honest. Not
Yeah.
not lying to your friends, everything's fine, just going to work, but actually bringing them in, and it can take a while to explain to people because people jump to conclusions instantly. They think you're just, I have one doctor who just called it stage fright. I'm like, Doc, I've been doing this over 20 years. This is not stage fright. Like, come on. So yeah, I would say that finding a community is incredibly valuable.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you and Frankie are doing what you're doing. Um, I think every injured musician would agree that one of the first things that they feel and experience, unless they have like their private teacher is somebody who's gone through an injury and knows the path back, they just don't know where to turn.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you go online and there's not a ton. It's getting better, but there's not a ton. And
Yeah, that's absolutely
yeah,
true. And my technique to solve this was to reach out to the big time people, because those are the people that often are fielding these calls, and to reach out to them and say, we're not pretending to have the answers, but we will act, ethically. We will give advice as best we can. Like I have seen over 60 people now who have just come in a situation like this. I give them half hour, 45 minutes of my time just to talk about what they're going through. And then, ethics determine that I have to tell people to go see a doctor because that's what we're
right.
supposed to do. But then once that, and there's a whole care network, and I'm not judging. I'm not saying who's better than who. That's not what it's about. But about giving somebody a sounding board to say, this person didn't work. What other ideas do you have? And I think that a core to what I believe is that each person needs to find their own solution. The best metaphor I ever heard was from some graduate student paper that said you can get all of the material for your shed in the backyard delivered to your door. And, all of the wood and nails and tools and all that stuff, but it's going to arrive in a big pile. And you're the one that's going to have to build the shed. And this for me was my recovery too. And despite how grateful I am to Bronwyn for her work, and Frankie helped me some too, it was me that figured it out with using their tools. It wasn't one of those things where in the lessons, I figured it all out. I put it all together, all of the experiences together. So yeah, this process that you refer to in the title of this podcast is one of discovery. And the metaphor I use very frequently is illuminating a path. Because as you say, when we hit this injury path, it's like it's opaque darkness. You have no idea. And so what the Embouchure Project seeks to do is turn on those metaphorical runway lights for you. Like, oh, here I am. You're the one that's going to have to make that journey. But yeah, having those lights in the dark, I think, is a very valuable thing for people as they're facing this sort of storm, citing X-Men metaphors, but storm of confusion and doubt about what's happening.
Totally. And the thing that I love about your project, your organization, is that, like, I guess you call it like that ethical approach of connecting them with the right people, not with one person.
One person.
I think it's. I mean, we all need a team to help us get back, but we're all in charge of our recovery. But I like to think of it as like you need to be taking like a Miracle of 34th Street approach, in that if we don't have it here, we'll help you find it somewhere else or something like that. And but at the end of the day, the ball's in the court.
So let me just quickly say that the underlying sort of the quiet work we're doing is to bring these skills informed by neurologists and practiced by physiotherapists, physical therapists, and occupational therapists. So they're informed by the science that we're studying in neurology. And the idea here is to spread the information to PTs and OTs across the continent, so that if you're in Utah, or if you're in Toronto, or if you're in Vancouver or Los Angeles, you have a local physiotherapist. We call it physio in Canada. Your local physical therapist who has trained in the embouchure, that can then use their skills and their sixth sense that all good healthcare professionals have to do the techniques, but with their own understanding of it, and then teach a better way forward. And that's, again, the project is getting the science to the physical and occupational therapists. Hey, Clark, I just want to clarify one thing. So sometimes we're not sure what to call this, and you refer to injury, and I refer to syndrome, and then there's dystonia, and I hope you don't mind. I just want to back up for a second,
Totally.
and to be clear about my thoughts on it, and to see if I can sort of answer people's like looming questions, which I hear a lot. Is it an injury? Is it not? So dystonia is the brain's sort of faulty response to a stimulus of playing. And that's going to include contraction of muscles inappropriately. Could be jaw, could be whatever. All this stuff happens. Okay, that's a dystonia. Injury is when you overuse your chop and you get or something like this, or you may, some people call them micro tears. So, whatever you want to call it. Some people get bumps under their, doesn't matter. What I think happens to us when we call it an injury, which is what you had, sometimes what happens is when we combine this injury with stress, the reaction to the injury is the injury, because our bodies heal. We know that. Even, a horrific break of your leg, which I've done before skiing, even that your body can heal from. And even if you end up a little crooked like I am, your body will compensate. It will figure it out. But let's say you're a brass player and you have what would be a 3-day injury. Let's say you injure the muscle, sprain or bruise the muscles. Well, if you're not extremely stressed, thinking about this as being your identity, part of your life, you might think, okay, I'm like a shortstop who hurt his ankle. I just need 3 days off, ice and rest, Maybe that's what you feel all you need. But let's say you add all of that stress to that. You might end up having this reaction in your brain that's very strong, very personal, and it becomes neurological. So this is not everybody. Some people just get injured. But most of the experience that I have is that it's a reaction. And what I didn't tell you as part of my story is that this is what happened to me. That I was in a practice session when I was having this sort of obsessive practice, and I sort of felt something go in my jaw, and I was like, oh, sort of like it's finally happened sort of vibe. And I remember this like sinking feeling of dread where it has happened, that thing I'm always scared of, that I was scared of happening. And so I think this is where actually the damage, but this damage was not necessarily physical, although it was a bit, but it was certainly sort of, it includes the neurological. So the finest neurologists in the world will say that there is no boundary between neurological and psychological. It's the same place, all right? So when people are confused about the terminology, I would say an injury is something that you heal from in a certain given amount of time, a soft tissue injury. And then if that injury persists, we need to have an understanding of this as being more holistic. And yes, it involves psychological factors. Of course it does. But this is why what I'm picking up on is you saying it's a team, that we need to address the psychological, we need to address the physical, and we need to address the neurological in the form of new habits. I hope that all makes sense.
It does. And I'm so grateful you did that. You made that clarification. And as we're kind of wrapping up, I feel like I would be doing my audience a disservice if I didn't pick your brain about this one thing that you mentioned with Frankie. And then I've got 2 final questions for you. But you mentioned your definition of discipline. And I think my iPad just died because I had it written down on there. But it said something along the lines of your definition of discipline is what your future self wish you had done in that moment. Or please forgive me if I'm misquoting and correct me if I do. But how does that relate to this notion that we have, this macho notion that we have as brass musicians, that discipline may just be like gritting your teeth, getting it done, no matter how you feel, and overworking ourselves, really?
Yeah. So thank you for reminding me of my own quote. I haven't said it in a while, and it's really important to add time to anything that we are trying to pursue. So I'm a pot of gold practicing forgets time, forgets that we need to heal. Any sort of thing like I'm going to learn a concerto today doesn't respect time, that things take time. And so, yeah, discipline is doing in the moment what you wish you had. Sorry, you said it better than I did. So doing in the moment what your future self wishes you had done is discipline.
Yeah.
But I need to remind you that taking a break takes discipline. It's
Absolutely.
not just working. So to a lot of people at the very beginning stages, and I love it, and a couple of people recently that I've helped at the Embouchure Project are right at the very beginning. And now I know the Embouchure Project is working because I had somebody reach out to me that had a show that night with a major symphony orchestra and was just like, it's just not feeling right. And I was like, this is the moment where it's great that you reached out because I can give you my future perspective of just coping. And so what I'll advise, depending on the situation, is that people just take a bit of time because their brain is swirling with the worry, the potential of what this weird new feeling means. And taking that down a notch, talk about discipline. I mean, you sound like you're a similar personality to me. It takes me more discipline to take time off than it is to practice.
Absolutely.
Sometimes
1,000,000%.
Yeah. And man, I realized during the pandemic that I was using practice as a sort of therapy, relaxation or something. Like, the family was all home, everybody's on Zoom at school and stuff. And like, I go into my practice room, nobody bugs me. And I thought, wait a second, am I using the horn to like get away from stuff? That can't, that's not. I mean, I had discipline to just say, no, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to go for a walk, And so, yeah, so I do believe that discipline, I do believe in practicing. Don't get me wrong. I do believe that most of us need to practice better. Some of us need to practice more. But generally, I think we need to practice in shorter amounts of time, especially when we're getting better, shorter amounts of time. And that's the discipline to stop, but the discipline to start it again. And so this process, again, is one that you stick to. Trust it. Okay. I'm sorry to keep on going back to your title, but it's so perfect because this process that I go to, okay, I'm going to do 10-minute practice sessions 7 times a day. I actually do it 7 times a day. And that to me that's the discipline because then in the future, I'll be able to look back on this period of practice and not quibble and say, well, I didn't really do it. So if I really commit to that process and it's not working, well, that's great information that I really need to know. So for me, I try to live a life that understands that actually being disciplined is way less stressful and way more productive than constantly procrastinating, which I'm a normal person. I do that too. But yeah, discipline to take time off when you need it.
So great. I mean, that was my aha moment, was the discipline is relative to what your body and mind needs at that moment, and so good. Anyway, last questions that I want to ask you. I ask these of all my guests, my favorite things to ask every time. The first one is, because this is what happened to me before this podcast existed. If somebody were to come up to you and had found you and your story through Trust the Process and said, hey, caught your episode with with Clark, and I'm going through my own injury. It doesn't have to be a horn player, any musician. What would be the one piece of advice that you would give them?
Well, one piece of advice that's very difficult. Um, but I would say take your time. That's the one piece of advice that that as I was saying a few minutes ago, respect recovery takes time. So um, when people don't take their time, they hurry about hither and thither, hitting walls all over the place. And people that take their time, one shrink I saw, and I thought was great. He said, "The shortest path is patience." I love that line.
That's
And
awesome.
so yeah, that my one piece of advice would be take your time.
Awesome. And then my last question, that really, for me, culminates, the title of the show is, if you could time travel back to that time of your injury, before your injury, and you had the opportunity, God or the universe or whoever gave you the opportunity to either take away that experience or leave it there, what would you choose and why?
Well, let me be honest. No, I wouldn't wish what I went through on any human being nor myself. However, there's a caveat to that. Now that I'm better, I am a much better teacher. I have found how to help others in a way that everyone dreams of. Everybody wants to help other people, right? And so the fact that when I get off these calls where I've helped somebody, actually truly helps, I feel elated. And and so, I had to be honest in that moment where you asked me that question, because I really just want to say I'm glad I went through it. And there are many aspects of my of my recovery that I'm glad I went through. But there were so many awful moments. I would be lying to say, "Oh, yay, I'm so glad it happened." But I need to elaborate one more little piece that I feel like I learned how to play the horn as a young man, as a boy, and then a young man. And I stayed playing the horn as a young person. I don't believe my embouchure would have survived the way it has, the way it used to be. So there is an aspect that I is unknowable for me. It's unknowable that my new embouchure is so much better, and I have no signs of age now. Like my pitch is very secure, my sound is good, and so I wonder. You know, I'm 50 now. Fast forward until I'm 60. I wonder if, because I've been through this, I will be a much better player at 60 than I would have been. So honest, honest answer is no. I would have rather just played my career and enjoyed it. But there are so many layers to that are unknowable.
Yeah. Appreciate your honesty. I don't think I've ever had somebody on the show say just flat out, just take away this experience. I just wish none of it had happened. I mean, it's such a nuanced experience.
Yeah, and most people are grateful because they learn a lot about themselves.
Yeah.
But I want to be honest that it was years, and so no, I wish I just sailed through naive as can be, playing my gig. Yeah, that's just the honest truth.
No, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Gabe. I'm so glad we have been able to lock this in and share it with the world. I'm excited for everybody to hear this one. Where can people find you and the Embouchure Project?
Yeah, so the embouchureproject.org is the website, the landing page. If you go to info@Embouchure Project, or right on there, info@embouchureproject.org, you can get in touch with me. And if you're having any problems, I'm glad to meet with anybody. You don't have to be a big time pro. I'm happy to meet with anybody for half hour, 45 minutes, and just help you try to find a path forward, and see if I can help you illuminate that path in the darkness.
Awesome. Well, everybody out there in podcast land, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. If you want to share your thoughts about this episode or where you're listening from, all the good stuff, send me a text. There's a little link in the descriptions, and Really looking forward to hearing from you. If you want to support the show, that's also available to you in the description below. And until next time, just keep on keeping on and keep trusting the process. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of Trust the Process, the official podcast of Musician Unchained, the newest coaching program dedicated to helping musicians navigate and overcome injury. But before you go, I have a few quick ways you can stay connected and support our growing community. First of all, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me a text with the link below and share your thoughts, questions, or just say hi. You can also check the show out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We also would love to see you in our Facebook support group, Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. If you found value in today's episode, consider making a donation to support our mission of empowering musicians worldwide. Every contribution helps us create more content and resources for you. So visit link number 2 below to support the mission. If you decide to donate, I'll send you my newest resource, the Injured Musician Toolkit, which is an ebook designed to give you tools to help you get through your injury. Subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive insights, tips, sneak previews of episodes, and announcements straight to your inbox. Act now and I will send you a free gift. So sign up at www.musicianunchained.com/newsletter. And if you or someone you know would like to go deeper with me in the topics of injury and mindset, head over back to musicianunchained.com and check out the Let's Hang tab. As always, I want to thank Daniel Baldwin, my audio engineer, and my sister Dana Lovell for her help with the promotional materials. There is no podcast without them. But before I go, I want to tell you how much I deeply appreciate your time and support. You are not alone on this journey. There are musicians and educators out there who need this resource, and we need to get it to them. Together, we are breaking the chain of old habits and thought patterns that don't serve us anymore, and unchaining the potential within ourselves to face each challenge with strength and resilience. So, as I always say, keep on keeping on, and keep trusting the process. Until next time.